lot like post-traumatic stress disorder sometimes. And I'm not saying that everyone who experiences secondary trauma stress will, have all the symptoms of PTSD, or, you could have none of them, you could have just a couple of them. But I just wanted to give an example of some of the things that might come up when you are hearing somebody share domestic violence. And I really like this quote. I was reading an article about somebody who does interpreting for individuals who are deaf, and I thought this did a really good job of describing what secondary trauma stress can feel like in that situation. Although the "what I don't think about can't hurt me" attitude gives us the comforting illusion of not being brought down by another's, I think that says trauma, I can't see it on the side, our shield, running away from our own vulnerability. I'm sorry, I need to is there a way that I can minimize? Oh, there it goes. Perfect. Let me read that again. Although "what I don't think about can't hurt me" attitude gives us the comforting illusion of not being brought down by another's pain, our shield, running away from our own vulnerability, in fact, insidiously leads us to a self-imposed exile. Unlike with computers, the traumatic memory, the file, never quite gets deleted. Instead, we constantly have to hold down the lid as our discomfort threatens to erupt into consciousness. And basically what that's saying is just when we start to feel the weight of somebody sharing with us and trying to push that feeling down and no, it's not a big deal, it's not about me, it's about them. In the long run, it does help to process those feelings and to take the time to acknowledge them and give yourself the care that you need. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the symptoms and signs of PTSD. And again, you can experience some of these things with secondary trauma stress, but also please don't be afraid that you're going to just start experiencing all of them because it looks really different for everyone. So the first category of symptoms are intrusive. So maybe you're having some distressing memories of an event that a client shared with you, having distressing dreams about the content that they're sharing with you, maybe a reaction where you feel as if the story that was shared with you is reoccurring in real time, having negative physical reactions to things that might remind you of domestic violence or something that your client shared with you. So those are intrusive symptoms. And the reason I'm sharing what the different clinical subjects are for each section is because I'm going to have you do something a little bit interactive that it helps if you understand what those things are. The next category is avoiding. So you might avoid certain activities, places, or people that remind you of domestic violence or things that your client has shared. You might experience changes in thought and mood, might not be able to remember some of the things that happened during an interpreting session. You might feel more isolated from other people, or like other people don't understand what you're going through or what you've experienced at work. And then the last section is changes in arousal, or how much you react to things in general. And some of those symptoms can be reckless behavior, maybe feeling more irritable and on edge, difficulty concentrating and sleeping. So these are a couple things that you may or may not experience with secondary trauma stress. So I wanted to share this scale with you to see maybe some of the things you might be experiencing. I never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So I actually took this scale and I got a really high score. But, I guess what I'm trying to say is even as a counselor and even as somebody who's been doing this for a little while, you know, secondary trauma stress still happens, and it comes and goes, and it's something that can be managed, and that is normal. So I just want you to take a minute or two here to look through these questions and see if any of them, if you relate to any of them or you have any thoughts about it. You can also go ahead and take the scale if you would like on a separate piece of paper. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to look at this, and then we'll discuss. And just in case you can't see that very well, the 1 score is never, 2 rarely, occasionally is 3, 4 often, and 5 very often. All right, I give you 30 more seconds to either finish filling it out or think about it. Okay, so you can start finishing up. So I'm curious what your reactions are to this. Is this something you would expect to feel from working with a client? Is it something you've ever experienced after working with a survivor? I definitely have experienced some of these things. You can either unmute or type in the chat. Becca, are you able to see the chat?
Hi, this is Mashkura.
Hello.
So yeah, I was gonna say that because of like our community, we almost all know each other.
Mm-hmm.
I had these kind of feelings a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is kind of hard, and mostly the theme, most part of the theme was covered last time when about the confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more about like with that and these things also, you know them, and when you have these things, feeling is very different,
So,
hard.
so a lot of your clients you know personally in the community.
Not a lot of them, but at least like the last ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm not gonna tell her name anything just
Sure, of
because of
course.
her baby. She had very hard time. Her pregnancy was um, she was having very hard time with her pregnancy and all with her family,
Mm-hmm.
and I know her, and it's yeah, it was kind of little difficult
Yeah.
and
It,
to be with her. Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. It can be really tough to watch someone, who you come to care about and be in contact with a lot go through something like
Yeah,
that.
almost every what is it, appointment, she has some hope that the doctors might say different thing, like, oh, this is fantastic, we didn't expect this, and she would expect some news, good news, but every single time she would hear the almost same thing that about her baby.
Mm.
So that was hard, and every time she cried, and that time it was hard for me, like, should I start, like, how do you say, empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It I That time it was hard for me to be like, to stay away and just translate,
Mm-hmm.
interpret her. Yeah, those time that time was very hard for me.
Right, because you're interpreting, but you're still a person that has feelings and trying to
Yes,
figure out.
sometimes I want to hug her and
Mm-hmm.
just give some hugs and feel her, try to help to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have to keep some professionalism
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, that time it was hard for me. Just watch her and say, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really tough balance. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing that.
like,
Becca, did anyone put anything in the chat? I can't see it while I'm looking at the. No? Okay.
I was
Um,
just gonna say,
oh,
I
go ahead.
think what's really tough about interpreting, especially if you interpret for the same client over multiple sessions or times, is that, there's professional sort of code of standards for,
Mm-hmm.
essentially just transmitting the message, right? And
yeah,
sort of being um, behind that person and not and relaying their emotion but not inserting your own. And so I think it can be really really challenging for interpreters
yeah,
to
Mm-hmm.
not really have the space to process what they're hearing and what they're seeing and the emotions that their clients are feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because the professional ethics or the job is to really give that voice to their clients instead of feeling it themselves. So I can imagine that, it can be
yeah,
really difficult to process some of those emotions when you're not really supposed to do that in that space.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
So I did also add in, just in case anybody's a big nerd like me and wanted to like add all the scores together. I mean, this is very like taking me back to like counseling school. So if you don't want to do that, I'm totally fine with that. But if you were curious, a score of 38 or more indicates that you might be having some secondary traumatic stress from your interactions with the people you work with. And each section, like I mentioned earlier, has its own score. So, like, you might be having more intrusive thoughts kind of symptoms than like avoidance, for example. But I'll move on from that because that's a little clinical. All right. So, protective factors. There are things that can make it easier to work with clients that have high amounts of trauma. Social support is a big one. So, if you have other people who do similar work as you or other people you work with, studies have shown that it's more effective than just talking to friends and family because these are people who share similar experiences as you and can really empathize with what you're going through. Another factor that can help you in these situations is having a supportive boss or supervisor, somebody that reassures you that what you're experiencing is normal and you don't have to feel guilty about it. And someone who also advocates for you to take good care of yourself and, you know, take that time to give yourself the attention you need as well for being this voice and this support figure for these individuals. And I thought this one was interesting. Access to power is another protective factor. So, if you're able to be involved in decision making at your place of work, if you feel like you have autonomy and independence to make decisions, and the ability to positively impact your traumatized client, which maybe it doesn't feel like it all the time, but in your position, you definitely do, because you're really a part of their empowerment process and a part of just allowing them to tell their story and to get the help that they need and be understood. So that is so important in empowerment. So that being said, I would love to hear from Ani about self-care.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ani again, and thanks for having me here today. Uh, I guess before I formally start, I want to acknowledge that I feel like a giant fraud today, because self-care is a really, in my experience, it's a lifelong journey when you're in a helping field, and some days and moments you're better at it than others. This morning, I think I was about to have a panic attack in the shower, and I thought, why am I doing a training on self-care today? I can't even breathe myself. So, I guess I wanted to be human with you all for a moment, because the world is really hard, and supporting survivors of domestic violence, um, or people who helping give people a voice is really hard work. Um, so thank you for doing everything that you're doing. You, by translating and interpreting, you're giving survivors a voice. And an important aspect of taking care of yourself as an interpreter is acknowledging what you can and cannot control. You're a human and you have limitations. And you know that you've done everything you can despite it being a difficult situation. So self care is acknowledging those limitations. You can provide interpretation and give clients a voice, provide information about how they can connect with others who might be able to help them, and provide resources, but you can't make the violence stop and you can't make decisions for them. And that's really tough. So just acknowledging what you can and cannot do. When you find out that someone is being abused or is in a difficult situation, it's hard to know what to do. For so many of the clients that you're working with, you likely are the first person who the survivor has ever told. Um, and that's a really heavy burden, but also a big honor, right? And so I think your instinct, it, or at least sometimes mine, is to save them from that relationship or the trauma that they're enduring. But it's not that easy. There's a lot of reasons, as you all know, that survivors stay in abusive relationships. So to kind of create a self care plan for yourself, know that you can acknowledge that they're in a difficult situation and be supportive and listen, but remember that you can't fix it for them. And you're not the only person in the world who can help them. And that's really hard to internalize in a real way, but it's really important, to realize that you might be the only person who understands, but that doesn't mean you're the only person who can help them. Because by doing what you're doing and interpreting, um, you're leading them towards others that can help as well. And let that be kind of a place where you can breathe into that and have some confidence that others can help as well. That's not all your responsibility. So, another thing I wanted to reassure you of is that I know from my 17-year career at Women's Center and working with several interpreters throughout my career that your kindness means so much to these women. I've seen clients who never would have had the courage to speak up without the support of their interpreter. And that's as simple as just being present and giving them that voice. So, as an interpreter, you have that unique bond with clients because you understand so many of the cultural ramifications of their stories, like we may not. And you're part of their community, as was mentioned earlier. So, having you not only there to speak to, but to understand what they're describing is such a huge deal to survivors. And please remember that you're enough, just as you are. Um, the struggles that we as humans are able to convey with clients, that really means a lot to people. So please remember that you are enough. You're giving clients a voice is life saving beyond your comprehension. So you may feel like you can't save them, but you're giving them a voice is life saving. So you're all heroes. You can go to the next slide, Avi. Becca says I'm talking too much about my feelings or feelings, all the feelings. Oh, I forgot setting boundaries. I skipped that. Sorry, I'll go through that really quickly. It's really important to set boundaries. That's like key to self-care. Make sure that if you give clients your information, that it's safe to do so, that they're not allowing their abuser certainly to get it, but also realize that like you might not want to hear from someone at 2 o'clock in the morning. So maybe shut your ringer off sometimes and say like, you know what, I'm not always available. Please never go to a client's home. Try to meet them in a public place. And remember that our hotline is available 24 hours in any language. So as someone opens up to you, once you feel like, okay, I need a break, please honor that and send them to our hotline where we will be happy to support them. So, self care. Self care comes in many different forms. Taking care of your bodies, your physical bodies, getting enough sleep and nourishing food, paying attention to your health and exercising. Those are parts of physical wellness. Emotional wellness, checking in with your emotions, Becca checking in with our emotions, um, being mindful of how we're feeling, and also acknowledging all the true feelings. The laughter, by laughing and crying and yelling, because this stuff is hard to hear about. So acknowledge those feelings. Some ideas for that might be journaling or practicing meditation, setting more boundaries, and sometimes being creative can be a good outlet for your emotions as well. Spiritual self care, finding something larger than yourself um, can sometimes help. Again, a way to do that might be practicing meditations. For some people, it's praying. For others, it's spending time in nature. Um, Intellectual self care, challenging yourself, finding a new book, a new topic to learn about, taking a new class. Sometimes those aspects of self care can help motivate you and get you out of a funk. Excuse me. Social self care. As Avi said, having a network of people that you feel like you can talk with, both in your personal life and your professional life, um, is really helpful. And I think those studies she mentioned, those are also studies I've seen, and I've found that to be true for myself. An idea that I have specifically for you all as interpreters would be so. Um, Mashkura, did I say your name correctly?
Yes.
Um, so you were talking about how because of confidentiality, which I missed that training last week, but I'm very familiar with confidentiality. It's it's you can't share what you're hearing. So I want to remind you though that if you're working with our clients at the Women's Center, we're working on those clients together. So for example, if you're working with Becca and interpreting for a client who Becca is serving,
Mhm.
it's certainly okay to talk with Becca about how that makes you feel, to kind of process the story. Because confidentiality, uh, if we're working on the same case, right, we can
Yeah.
process together. And that can be very helpful. And it can be very meaningful to the advocate and to the interpreter, as I've found throughout experience. So, um, reach out to people who understand and use Women's Center if we can be of assistance because we get
Oh,
how hard this is. So I just wanted to you had mentioned that, so
yeah.
we can talk some more about it in a second.
Mhm.
Uh, but thank you for sharing your story and bringing that up. So I wanted to
Okay.
ask all of you um, what you do for self care. You can unmute yourselves or chat. Um, I need all the ideas I can get today.
Ani, I like baking yummy treats, and I also take my dog for walks, even though he sometimes misbehaves, and that makes me feel more stressed. But um, snuggling with my pet, watching mindless television, the Yes to the Dress has been a great one as of recently for me. Even though I find it astronomical that people can spend so much money on one dress, I really enjoy watching them try them on. Um, yeah, cooking, baking, that's been getting me through.
Becca.
I like doing yoga and grounding, breathing kind of things. I also like walking my dog, doing something physical to take myself out of my head and into my body. Um, yeah, just being outside, a good one.
Mm, cleaning. Yeah. I like watching Turkish shows. When I watch it, I just forget everything.
So do you find that's helpful after like the experience you shared about in the doctor's office and that client you have? Is that
Mhm.
like do you go to your Turkish shows after a hard day like that?
Yeah, if I watch that Turkish shows, like, it's kind of soap operas. They have all their own problems, everything. So you kind of forget about what you have here in your life, and you start. It is also somehow headache, but it's not yours. So sometimes, yeah, I don't watch it like sitting. Mostly, I like cooking, and so I watch it while I'm cooking. So that time, I forget some things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I see in the chat that Natalie says that they do Pilates and play video games. Um, that's good. Oh, podcasts, music, painting. That's such wonderful stuff. Thank you for sharing. So you can go to the next slide, Avi. Um, I would encourage you all, we're not going to go through all this today, but I would encourage you to think about these things for a few minutes because on stressful days or with stressful client situations, sometimes it's really hard to access those things that we do that feel good. And sometimes um, at all the things I do to feel good, like there's some days where they're just not working. So you need an array of activities. And this is a list that might help inspire some of that. So just take a minute and think about some of these things for yourself. All right, does anyone have anything that really jumped out at them that they want to share? Okay, you can move on, Avi. So we're going to take a moment and listen to this video. And I invite you to just relax. I hope.
I'm trying. The video is not coming. Oh, there it is.
This mindfulness exercise is called 5-4-3-2-1, and this is a great exercise to help bring you back to the present moment when you're starting to feel stressed out. This exercise helps you focus on your senses. So to get started, settle into your seat, your chair, or on your floor, wherever you are, and let's take a big team breath together in through your nose and out through your mouth. I invite you to look around and notice 5 different objects that you see. Close your eyes or gaze down if that's more comfortable for you, and notice 4 different sounds. Bringing your attention within, notice 3 feelings or sensations you are experiencing right now. And now bringing your attention to your sense of smell, notice 2 smells. And you can use your hands or your shirt. And bringing your attention to your sense of taste. What do you notice? Let's everybody take a team breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And slowly wiggle your toes and your fingers and bring your attention back to the room. And remember that this exercise is good to help you when you're feeling stressed out, and help you bring you back to the present moment. Just by noticing 5 things. Maybe notice 5 things that are the same color, or 5 different shapes, and 4 sounds that will help bring you back to the present moment and focus on what's in front of you. Congrats on taking time for yourself by practicing mindfulness.
All right, congratulations. We took a 3-minute meditation.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Avi. So I don't Thank you for participating in that. And Nadia, it's awesome that you use an app to meditate. That's a great way to feel your body and be, like he said, be in the present moment. And I'm glad that that some of you are already doing those types of self-care activities. Um, so thank you again so much for having us and for the work that you're all doing. Please take good care of yourselves in whatever way makes most sense to you. And I'm really honored that the real team asked us to do this. To conclude, you can see a list of all the services we provide at Women's Center if you didn't already know, as well as the contact information for Avi and me. And Becca, I don't know if you had generally wrap up type stuff.
I do have a little a link that I'll post in the chat box for if you guys have any thoughts or feedback on today's session, but I know that we purposefully left a little bit of time for folks to ask questions or share comments. We're a small group, so feel free to unmute yourself. I will stop the recording so folks can feel a little more comfortable to ask or share anything that they would like. But thanks again for coming. And the floor is all yours to ask any questions or share any comments.